During our divorce hearing, my wife came in pregnant, smiling like she'd already won. She claimed it was mine. I revealed my vasectomy. Her smile shattered. Her lawyer asked for a break. Then her sister admitted everything. The affair, the trick, the plan for my money. She's alone now. I found peace. It was supposed to be just another dreary chapter in the dissolution of my 7-year marriage, another contentious divorce hearing where my ex-wife, Tara, and her shark-like lawyer would attempt to extract every last cent and shred of dignity from me. I sat beside Sam Davidson, my attorney, reviewing the meticulously prepared documents that laid bare my financial contributions and Tara's minimal input, feeling the familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The air in the courtroom was thick with the sterile scent of polished wood and stale ambition, a fitting backdrop for the systematic dismantling of a life once shared. Then she walked in. Tara. She moved with an almost ethereal confidence, her usually reserved demeanor replaced by a swagger I'd never seen. She wore a dress, a vibrant, almost aggressive crimson that seemed to mock the solemnity of the court, clinging to her clearly swollen belly. She wasn't just showing. She was undeniably, conspicuously pregnant, at least 6 months along. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the last bitter exchange after I'd discovered her affair. This was impossible. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, now glinted with a triumphant, almost predatory satisfaction as they met mine across the courtroom. She cradled her belly with both hands, a gesture of maternal pride that, in this context, felt like a perverse parody. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face, a smile that radiated a grotesque certainty of victory, a silent, taunting declaration that she had already won, that she possessed the ultimate, undeniable proof of my supposed villainy. It was a smile designed not just to wound, but to utterly annihilate. It said, "You'll embarrass me now, Drew, by trying to deny this." Sam, always attuned to shifts in the courtroom's subtle currents, shot me a quick, questioning glance. I could only shake my head, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of disbelief and burgeoning anger. The preliminary formalities concluded, and Tara's lawyer, Bennett, a man whose slicked-back hair seemed to match his equally slick tactics, rose with an unctuous smile. "Your Honor," he began, his voice oozing practiced concern, "we would like to amend our petition in light of recent, significant developments." He gestured toward Tara, whose angelic, innocent expression was now perfectly honed, a performance perfected for the court. "As you can see, Mrs. Harmon is expecting. This profoundly alters the financial considerations of this case, as Mr. Harmon is now attempting to abandon not only his wife but his unborn child." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The judge, Judge Harriet Winters, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, raised a single, skeptical eyebrow. Her gaze, however, lingered on me, hardening with thinly veiled contempt. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room, accusing, condemning. Tara's smile widened imperceptibly, a silent echo of her lawyer's damning words. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just about money. This was about systematically destroying my reputation, painting me as a callous monster who would abandon his own flesh and blood. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated malice of it, was breathtaking. Sam, ever the professional, scribbled furiously on his legal pad. "Paternity test ASAP. Mr. Harmon." Judge Winter's voice cut through the stunned silence, cold and sharp. "Were you aware of this pregnancy?" Bennett, sensing a tactical advantage, interjected before I could even formulate a reply. "Your Honor." He was indeed aware. Mrs. Harmon informed him during their last attempt at reconciliation, which we believe precipitated his abrupt filing for divorce. It was a blatant, calculated lie. The outright fabrication made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was her game, not mine. Sam was already on his feet, about to object, but I gently, almost imperceptibly, shook my head, silently communicating that I had this. This was my moment. I rose slowly, deliberately, my gaze fixed on Tara, whose triumphant smile was now fixed, almost grotesque. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Sam, momentarily confused by my actions, tugged lightly at my sleeve, but I gave a small, reassuring shake of my head. There would be no outburst, no emotional plea, only cold, hard truth. "Your Honor." My voice was steady, surprisingly calm amidst the storm brewing inside me. Every word was carefully enunciated, deliberate. "With all due respect, I've had a vasectomy since August 2018. The effect was instantaneous and absolute." The courtroom plunged into a silence so profound, it felt as if the very air had been sucked out of the room. Time itself seemed to warp, stretching out into an eternity. Tara's triumphant smile, that smug, self-satisfied grin that had been plastered across her face, froze. It didn't just falter. It shattered, disintegrating in real time before my eyes. Her eyes, wide with sudden, horrifying comprehension, darted frantically to her lawyer, Bennett, whose own expression morphed from smug confidence to utter bewilderment, then to a dawning horror as the full implications of my statement sank in. He stared at her, an unspoken, furious question blazing in his eyes. The vivid crimson dress, which moments before had symbolized her audacious victory, now seemed to highlight the sudden, ghostly pallor of her face, making her appear ashen, almost transparent. The carefully constructed illusion, the elaborate charade, had just been spectacularly, irrevocably demolished. "I have my medical records here, Your Honor," I continued, my voice now imbued with a steel-like calm, the storm of my emotions carefully contained, channeled into a precise, surgical strike. I reached into my briefcase, pulling out a neatly organized folder, a testament to my foresight, my unwavering commitment to truth. I had started carrying this documentation, including 2 follow-up sperm count tests confirming the procedure's success, ever since the divorce proceedings began. Not because I had anticipated this exact, grotesque scenario, but because I wanted a complete, undeniable record of my medical situation, a comprehensive account of my deliberate choice not to have children. It was a shield, a weapon, and now it was her undoing. The procedure was performed by Dr. Levinson at Mercy Medical Center on August 10, 2018. I explained, my words echoing in the stunned silence. "I have the records and the receipts to prove it. I also have documentation of my genetic condition, polycystic neuropathy, the same condition that caused my father's early death, which prompted this decision." Each piece of information was a nail in the coffin of her lie, a methodical dismantling of her deceit. I am not the father of that child. The finality of my declaration hung in the air, indisputable, unassailable. Tara was visibly shaking now, her face a mask of utter devastation, all traces of her triumphant smile long gone. Bennett, her slick lawyer, stood up, clearly flustered, his composure finally shattered. "Your Honor," he stammered, his usual smooth delivery now a fractured mess, "my client was not made aware of any such procedure. This is clearly a desperate attempt by Mr. Harmon to evade responsibility." His voice was laced with a desperate incredulity, a frantic attempt to salvage a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of his control. He was, I realized, as blindsided by her deception as I had been. "Your Honor," Judge Winters said, her voice cutting through Bennett's frantic attempts to interrupt. She held up a hand, silencing him. "Let me see those records, please." I handed the folder to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. She meticulously examined each document, the surgical consent forms, the doctor's notes, the laboratory reports confirming the absence of viable sperm. Her expression, initially one of skepticism towards me, now shifted, hardening with a cold, almost clinical appraisal as she read. The procedure was performed by Dr. Levinson at Mercy Medical Center on August 10, 2018. I explained, my voice calm, almost detached, as I recited the irrefutable facts. "I have the records and receipts. I also have documentation of my genetic condition, polycystic neuropathy, the same condition that caused my father's early death, which prompted this decision." Tara was visibly shaking now, her face ashen, all traces of her triumphant smile long gone. Bennett leaned over to whisper something to her, his face a mask of furious concern, but she violently jerked away from him, her eyes wide with a desperate, trapped animal fear. The carefully constructed facade had not just crumbled, it had evaporated, leaving behind only raw, exposed vulnerability. "These appear to be in order," Judge Winters said after a moment, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the undeniable weight of authority. Her gaze, cold and piercing, fixed on Tara. "Mrs. Harmon, were you aware of this procedure?" Tara stood, her hand still instinctively cradling her belly, a gesture of maternal protection that now seemed grotesquely ironic. Her voice, when it came, was a desperate, almost hysterical shriek. He never told me. He couldn't have. We were still intimate after that date." The lie, desperate and pathetic, hung in the air, a final, futile attempt to cling to her unraveling narrative. "The procedure doesn't affect that aspect of function, Your Honor," I explained quietly, my voice remaining level, despite the tumultuous emotions churning within me. "Only fertility. And yes, we were intimate during our reconciliation period, which began in November 2018, 3 months after my vasectomy." The quiet, factual delivery of this truth was far more devastating than any shouted accusation. It exposed her lie for what it was, a desperate, poorly constructed fabrication. Bennett, now visibly panicked, quickly requested a 15-minute recess, which the judge, after a sharp glance at Tara, granted. As they huddled in fierce, hushed conversation at the far side of the courtroom, their whispers barely audible, but their body language screaming frantic desperation. Sam looked at me with a mixture of immense relief and exasperated amusement. A heads up would have been nice, Drew, he muttered, shaking his head. This could have gone south quickly if your records weren't in order. You were holding a nuclear bomb in your back pocket. I didn't know she'd pull this, I replied, still processing the sheer absurdity, the audacious evil of her ultimate deception. I never thought she'd try to pass off another man's child as mine in court. Who do you think? Sam began, leaving the question hanging, the answer implicitly understood. Her boss, Mark, I supplied, the name a bitter taste on my tongue. They've been having an affair for years. That's why I filed for divorce the second time. When the session resumed, Tara and her lawyer had clearly recalibrated their approach, a desperate scramble to find a new angle, a new lie. Bennett adopted a completely different tone, one of injured innocence and victimhood. He now claimed emotional distress due to my secretive medical procedure, arguing it constituted its own form of marital misconduct, a deliberate act of deception on my part. Your Honor, he pleaded, his voice now imbued with a feigned indignation. While my client may have been mistaken about the paternity of her child, the underlying issue remains Mr. Harmon's deception. He underwent a major medical procedure affecting their marital relationship without informing his wife. Judge Winters was having none of it. Her patience, clearly, had run out. Her voice was ice-cold, precise, and utterly damning. Counselor, she stated, her gaze searing into Bennett, attempting to attribute paternity of another man's child to Mr. Harmon is a serious matter. Your client just testified under oath that this child is her husband's, which we've now established is biologically impossible. I suggest you confer with your client about the implications of perjury before proceeding further. The word perjury hung in the air, a heavy, unavoidable threat. She then turned to address both parties, her voice firm and unequivocal. Given these developments, we will postpone today's hearing on temporary asset allocation. Mr. Bennett, you have 48 hours to submit a revised petition that accurately reflects your client's circumstances. Mr. Davidson, you may file a response within 72 hours thereafter. As she stood to leave, her final words were a chilling warning directed solely at Tara. And Mrs. Harmon, I strongly advise you to be forthright in all future filings with this court. Attempting to mislead the court about paternity is grounds for sanctions. The gavel struck, a sharp, decisive crack that echoed the finality of her words, sealing Tara's fate. As I gathered my things, the courtroom still buzzing with the aftershocks of Judge Winter's damning pronouncement, I caught Tara's eye across the now chaotic room. Her carefully constructed facade, the mask of the wounded expectant mother, had completely fallen away. In its place was a raw, naked hatred, a look so visceral and profound it made my stomach churn. Her eyes, once capable of feigning such innocent vulnerability, now burned with a furious, unadulterated contempt, fixed on me as if I were the architect of her every misfortune, rather than the recipient of her calculated malice. Her lawyer, Bennett, was still whispering urgently to her, his voice a low, frantic drone, his gestures agitated. He was clearly attempting to salvage what little dignity she had left, perhaps even trying to explain the gravity of perjury to his now incriminated client. But Tara seemed oblivious to his frantic counsel. Her entire being was consumed by that venomous glare, a silent accusation hurled directly at me. It was the look of someone whose meticulously crafted plan had just spectacularly, irrevocably backfired, leaving her exposed, humiliated, and utterly desperate. The vivid crimson dress, which had once seemed to mock the solemnity of the court, now appeared garish, a stark contrast to her ashen face and the ruin of her carefully cultivated image. In that moment, a profound realization washed over me. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore, or even about her affair. This was about power, control, and the deeply ingrained belief that she could manipulate reality to suit her desires, no matter the cost to others. And in that same moment, watching her desperate fury, I felt a strange sense of liberation, a quiet satisfaction. The truth, my truth, had finally been spoken, and it had shattered her lies into a million pieces. The judge's final words, and Mrs. Harmon, I strongly advise you to be forthright in all future filings with this court. Attempting to mislead the court about paternity is grounds for sanctions, echoed in the tense silence. It was a clear, unambiguous warning, a legal guillotine hanging over Tara's head. The implications were immense. Not only had her grand deception failed, but she now faced potential legal repercussions for her dishonesty. The objective justice, delivered by a dispassionate court, was far more potent, far more satisfying than any personal act of revenge I could have conceived. It was a validation, not just of my innocence, but of the very principle of truth. As the judge departed, her imposing figure disappearing through the side door, the courtroom slowly began to stir, the hushed whispers turning into a low murmur. People packed their bags, their eyes still occasionally flickering towards Tara, a mixture of curiosity, pity, and thinly veiled judgment in their gazes. The mask had fallen, and everyone had seen the ugliness beneath. Tara, still incandescent with rage, made a desperate lunge towards me as I turned to leave, mascara now streaking down her face from silent tears of fury, not sorrow. "Drew, please," she hissed, her voice raw, desperate, catching my arm with surprising strength. "Let me explain." But her lawyer, finally regaining some semblance of control, intercepted her, physically steering her towards the exit, while whispering something sharp and urgent that made her stop struggling, albeit reluctantly. His face was grim, his eyes avoiding mine, a clear indication of his professional mortification and the deep trouble his client was now in. The charade was over, and the consequences were just beginning to unfold. 3 days had passed since that dramatic confrontation, and in the aftermath, the carefully constructed composure of my life had been replaced by a cacophony of frantic, desperate calls and texts from Tara. My phone, once a quiet instrument of connection, had become a conduit for her unraveling. 43 calls from Tara, a number that seemed to scream her growing desperation, flashed across my screen. Countless texts followed, a bewildering, often contradictory, stream of messages ranging from tearful, histrionic apologies to vicious, blame-shifting accusations. She claimed alternately that I had tricked her by getting the vasectomy, as if my autonomous medical decision was some elaborate plot against her. Then, in a bizarre twist of logic, she insisted that the baby might miraculously be mine despite the procedure, a desperate cling to a reality that simply did not exist. Finally, in her most recent messages, the pleas turned pathetic, almost cringeworthy. She admitted, grudgingly, that she had made a horrible mistake, but assured me, with a desperate, self-serving certainty, that we could still work things out and be a family if I would just talk to her, if I would just listen to her perform another act of reconciliation. Each message was a testament to her profound inability to accept responsibility, a desperate dance between manipulative apology and furious blame. I had, by this point, silenced her calls, diverting them directly to voicemail, and blocked her number from sending notifications. I was done with her emotional manipulation, done with her desperate attempts to rewrite reality. Meanwhile, her boss, Mark, the affair partner, and, almost certainly, the biological father, had apparently gone completely silent since she had undoubtedly informed him about the courtroom revelation. According to a mutual friend who still worked at their company, Mark had suddenly taken a personal leave from the firm, clearing his schedule for the next month, effectively vanishing. The convenient disappearance spoke volumes, a clear indication that he wanted no part in the messy aftermath of Tara's public humiliation. He, too, was abandoning her, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. The swiftness of his retreat was a stark, chilling reminder of the ephemeral nature of relationships built on deceit and selfish gratification. The following week brought further, equally satisfying developments, confirming the irreversible nature of Tara's downfall. Her lawyer, Bennett, the man who had so confidently presented her fabricated narrative in court, formally withdrew from representing her. Apparently, he had indeed been blindsided by the pregnancy deception beforehand and wanted no part in continuing as her counsel after being so thoroughly humiliated in court. His professional reputation, I imagined, had taken a significant hit, and he was cutting his losses. Tara, desperate and now without experienced counsel, quickly hired new representation, a lawyer with a reputation for aggressive, borderline unethical tactics, but significantly less respected in legal circles. It was a clear sign of her diminishing options, her increasingly desperate plight. My lawyer, Sam, wasting no time, filed for an expedited divorce process based on the attempted fraud, leveraging the court's now documented knowledge of Tara's deception. Judge Winters, true to her word, granted our request without hesitation. Instead of the year-long, emotionally draining process we had initially anticipated, we received a final hearing date just 6 weeks out. It was a relief, a sudden acceleration towards a future free from her toxic presence. The legal system, slow and bureaucratic as it often was now moving with a satisfying, almost vengeful speed. 2 days before that final hearing, a stark reminder of the human cost of Tara's machinations appeared unexpectedly at my apartment door. It was Claire, Tara's sister. We had always gotten along well, a quiet friendship based on mutual respect, and she had commendably attempted to remain neutral during the initial, less acrimonious stages of our separation. Her presence now, however, conveyed a deeper, more unsettling purpose. She sat stiffly on my couch, a picture of strained discomfort, her usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a palpable tension. "I owe you an apology, Drew," she began, her voice slow, tinged with a weariness that went beyond mere fatigue. "Tara told me you knew about the baby and were abandoning her. I believed her." Her words, though hurtful, no longer held the power to wound. I simply offered her coffee, which she politely declined, waiting for her to continue. "What changed, Claire?" I asked, my voice devoid of accusation. genuinely curious about the shift in her perspective. It was rare for Tara's narratives to be so thoroughly pierced. Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself, clearly grappling with the painful truth she was about to reveal. The full extent of Tara's elaborate web of lies, it seemed, was finally beginning to unravel, not just in the sterile confines of the courtroom, but within her own family. Claire took a deep, shuddering breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her gaze, usually so gentle, was now edged with a profound sadness and something akin to a sickening disgust. She finally admitted everything to me yesterday. True, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, laden with a heavy mix of shame and betrayal. The affair with Mark, trying to trick you into having children during your marriage, even after your diagnosis, deliberately getting pregnant by Mark while planning to pass the child off as yours for the divorce settlement. Claire shook her head, a physical manifestation of the revulsion she felt. She calculated that if the court thought the baby was yours, she'd secure much more favorable terms and ongoing support. She saw you as a means to an end. True, purely financial leverage. My blood ran cold, despite the fact that I had already pieced together much of this. To hear it articulated so starkly, so coldly, by someone who had once stood by her, was a chilling confirmation of Tara's utter lack of conscience. It was a confirmation of her depravity, her willingness to weaponize life itself for personal gain. And Mark? I asked, my voice flat, though a fresh wave of bitterness washed over me at the mention of his name. What about him? Claire let out a mirthless laugh, a dry, hollow sound. He wants nothing to do with her now. Apparently, he never wanted children either. One of the reasons she was having problems with both of you, she confessed. A bitter irony. Tara, so desperate for a biological child, had chosen two men who were fundamentally opposed to the idea, each for their own reasons. When your lawyer sent his attorney the court transcripts, detailing Tara's testimony and your medical records, Claire trailed off, shaking her head again. Let's just say he's not stepping up. He saw the writing on the wall. He's officially relocated to the Singapore office and has made it clear he intends to remain there. He cut all ties, professionally and personally. A strange mix of vindication and weariness settled over me. Mark, the supposed savior, the man who understood Tara's desires, had proven to be just as self-serving and cowardly as she was manipulative. He had abandoned her, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices alone. I'm sorry she dragged you into this, Claire, I said, and I truly meant it. Claire had always been a kind, empathetic soul, caught in the crossfire of her sister's malicious games. I'm the one who's sorry, Drew, she replied, her voice thick with regret, tears finally welling in her eyes. I should have seen who she really was sooner. I should have spoken up, my own sister. I can't believe what she tried to do to you. The depth of her disillusionment was palpable, a testament to the profound damage Tara had inflicted not just on me, but on her own family. Her confession was the final, devastating nail in the coffin of Tara's public and private image, a third-party validation of my truth, sealing her fate not just in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of those closest to her. The objective justice I craved was being delivered, not by my hand, but by the relentless, unforgiving march of truth. The final divorce hearing, set just 6 weeks after the court's stunning ruling, was mercifully straightforward. With Tara's egregious deception explicitly exposed and meticulously documented, the judge was, predictably, entirely unsympathetic to her demands. Her meticulously crafted narrative of victimhood had been systematically dismantled, leaving her with no moral or legal leverage. The proceedings were swift, clinical, and utterly devoid of the emotional theatrics that had marked the initial hearing. She received no alimony, a devastating blow to her financial aspirations, which had clearly been a significant motivation behind her schemes. Her attempts to claim more than her rightful share were swiftly rejected. Instead, she was awarded only her fair share of our joint assets, those acquired during the marriage, nothing more. My inheritance from my grandmother, my retirement accounts, and even my grandmother's heirloom jewelry, which she had brazenly tried to claim as her own, remained mine, unequivocally protected from her greedy grasp. I kept the house, the physical embodiment of a future I had once envisioned with her, now free to be reshaped into a sanctuary of my own. I immediately began the process of refinancing to remove her name and buying out her portion of the equity, severing the last financial ties that bound us. As we left the courtroom for the last time, the heavy oak doors closing with a definitive thud behind us, Tara, now heavily pregnant and looking far more vulnerable than I had ever seen her, made one final, desperate plea. She caught my arm, her touch surprisingly weak, almost pleading. Drew, please, she whispered, her voice hoarse, imbued with a deeply tired, desperate resonance that had replaced her usual sharp-edged assertiveness. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But this baby needs a father. Her carefully constructed facade was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear of the future. I gently removed her hand. I touch firm, but not unkind. There was no anger left, only a profound sense of closure. I'm sure Mark will come around once the paternity test confirms what everyone already knows, Tara. My voice was calm, almost detached, devoid of the emotional entanglement that had once defined our interactions. A fresh wave of tears welled in her eyes, silent and despairing. He won't, she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fractured admission of her complete isolation. He's relocated to the Singapore office, permanently. The full weight of her abandonment, by both me and the man she had chosen to betray me with, settled around her like a shroud. Then, I'm truly sorry for your situation, Tara, I replied, my voice steady, imbued with a genuine, if detached, empathy for the wreckage she had created for herself. But it's not my responsibility to fix it. I wish you and your child well, but our chapter is closed. Permanently. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the echoing hallway, a testament to the bitter, undeniable consequences of her own deceit. The finality of the moment was absolute, a profound sense of liberation washing over me as I stepped into a future that was, finally, truly my own. 6 months have passed since the divorce was finalized. 6 months since I walked away from Tara and the wreckage of our life together. The world, once shrouded in the bitter fog of betrayal and legal battles, has slowly, tentatively, begun to clear. Through mutual friends, the kind who navigate the tricky waters of shared acquaintances, I've heard snippets of Tara's new reality. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy, a fact that, surprisingly, brought no residual anger, only a detached sense of finality. She has, apparently, moved back to her hometown, seeking refuge and support from her parents, a stark contrast to the ambitious corporate life she once pursued. Mark, the father of her child and the catalyst for much of her deceit, remains in Singapore, providing financial support, I'm told, but with no plans to return or integrate himself into her new, dramatically diminished life. His absence is a silent, enduring testament to the ephemeral nature of their affair, a stark reminder of Tara's profound miscalculations. As for me, I'm focusing on my health, my future, and the quiet, profound act of rebuilding. The diagnosis of polycystic neuropathy still looms, a long-term challenge I must confront. But now, it feels less like a death sentence and more like a path to be navigated with foresight and determination. I've started treatment with a specialist, a woman whose optimism about new therapies that might slow the progression of the disease has breathed a fresh sense of hope into my often daunting prognosis. The house, once a battleground of conflicting desires, remains mine, but I've renovated it extensively, a meticulous, almost ritualistic process of exorcising the ghosts of my past. Every trace of my life with Tara has been systematically removed, replaced by elements that reflect my own evolving identity, my renewed sense of self. The renovations are not just aesthetic, they are also practical, making the house fully accessible for when my symptoms eventually worsen. It's a proactive acceptance of my future, a pragmatic embrace of reality rather than a desperate clinging to a past that never truly was. The most unexpected, and perhaps most profoundly positive, outcome of this entire ordeal has been connecting with a support group for people living with my condition. It was through them, a community of shared understanding and resilience, that I've met others who chose not to have biological children for the very same reasons I did. For the first time, I don't feel defensive about that choice, that deeply personal and ethical decision. Instead, I feel a profound sense of peace, a quiet validation that reverberates through my entire being. Their shared experiences, their unwavering acceptance, have provided a new definition of family, a soul family built not on blood, but on empathy, understanding, and shared human experience. It is a connection that fills a void I didn't even realize existed, a warm, reassuring presence that stands in stark contrast to the cold, calculating manipulations of my past. The emptiness left by Tara's betrayal has been gradually, beautifully, filled by genuine connection and authentic understanding. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out, how an alternate reality might have unfolded, if Tara and I had been honest with each other from the very beginning. If I had told her about the vasectomy immediately, laid bare my fears and my choices without the shroud of secrecy. If she had been upfront about her unwillingness to consider alternatives to biological children, openly expressing her deep-seated desire rather than resorting to manipulative schemes. If she hadn't been carrying on an affair behind my back, systematically dismantling our marriage long before I even knew it was broken. These what-ifs, like ghosts of a potential past, sometimes whisper in the quiet corners of my mind. But dwelling on such hypotheticals, on the labyrinthine paths of what might have been, is pointless. The most valuable lesson, the most profound truth gleaned from this entire harrowing experience, is the absolute importance of living authentically, of embracing one's truth, even when it is difficult, even when it demands painful confrontations. There can be no more hiding, No more compromising on fundamental values. No more relationships built on deception and manipulation. The foundation of my life must, from this point forward, be constructed solely on the bedrock of honesty and genuine connection. My life isn't perfect. My medical prognosis remains challenging, a shadow that still lingers on the horizon of my future. And some days, the physical symptoms are frightening, a stark reminder of the battle I must continue to wage. But there's an overwhelming sense of rightness to my world now, a profound clarity that was conspicuously absent during those 7 years of marriage to Tara. There is a foundation of truth that, though hard-won, is now unshakable, providing a stable ground upon which to build a genuine, fulfilling existence. Sometimes, the happiest ending isn't what you initially pictured for yourself, isn't the idyllic, perfectly painted canvas you once envisioned. Sometimes, it's just the quiet, profound satisfaction of standing in your truth, unyielding and uncompromised when it matters most. It is the peace found in authenticity, the strength derived from integrity, and the enduring belief that even in the face of profound betrayal, one can reclaim their narrative, heal their wounds, and forge a new, truer path forward. My journey continues, not without its challenges, but now, finally, with the guiding light of unwavering honesty,